Hola clase, ¿qué tal? Hoy vamos a estudiar los verbos irregulares del pretérito, los verbos piratas. So in the last video, we started learning a new tense. We started learning the preterite tense, which is the first of two past tenses that we're going to learn this year. And we learned the regular verbs in the preterite tense. But just like in the present tense, the preterite tense has some irregular verbs. It actually has a lot of irregular verbs. And so the best way for us to memorize all of those different irregular verbs is to put them into different categories. So just like in the present tense, we had different categories like stem changers, go verbs, first person irregulars, total irregulars. We're also going to have different categories for our irregular verbs in the preterite tense so that we can keep them all organized. So we're still talking about things that happened in the past, but these verbs are just irregular when you change them into the past tense. We have irregular verbs as well in the past tense. For example, to go is irregular in the past tense in English. We say I went, right? So we completely change the verb go to went. And so that's kind of what irregular verbs do in the preterite tense as well. They don't follow the regular patterns that we just learned in the last video. So the first group of irregulars that we're going to learn about are pirate verbs. So verbos piratas. And this is just a nickname that we give to them to help us memorize them. And you will notice that pirate verbs, there's no such thing as pirate verbs in the present tense. We have stem changers and all of those kind of things. And we also will have stem changers in the preterite tense. But pirate verbs, this category of irregular verbs, they only exist in the preterite tense. So on the next slide, I'll show you kind of why they get the nickname pirate verbs. All right, so let's figure out what a pirate verb is. A pirate verb is any verb that ends in car, gar, or zar. So you can see three verbs already listed here that end in car, gar, or zar. Buscar ends in car, pagar ends in gar, and almorzar ends in zar. But like I said, any verb that ends in those three letters would also be considered a pirate verb. So a verb like cargar, it ends in gar, so it's also going to be a pirate verb. You guys know the verb tocar, to touch or to play like an instrument. It ends in car, so it is a cargarzar verb. And then even another one like empezar, to begin, to start or to begin. It ends in zar, and so it's also a cargar zar verb, or what we give the nickname pirate verb to. Now you still might be wondering, yeah, but why do you call verbs that end in cargar zar pirate verbs? Well, here's why. If you sound them out, it actually sounds like a pirate. So car, gar, zar, is that R sound that a pirate makes. So it's just a funny, goofy way to help group all these verbs together. So here's what cargarzar verbs do, or here's what pirate verbs do. They take a spelling change. And they take a spelling change in the yo form of the verb. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you how any of these verbs like that I've listed here, buscar, pagar, almorzar, cargar, tocar, empezar, there's a whole bunch of others. All of these verbs, when they're in the preterite tense, so when you're using them in the past tense, they all end up taking a slight spelling change, but they only do that in the yo form. We'll look at car verbs first. All verbs that end in car will change the C to a QU. So let's take the verb buscar, for example, which means to look for, and we'll conjugate it in the preterite tense so that you can see what it would look like. So we have yo busqué, tú buscaste, ella buscó, nosotros buscamos, and ustedes buscaron. So if I say yo busqué mi mochila ayer, I looked for my backpack yesterday, That's how I would conjugate the verb buscar. And you will see that I take the C and I change it to a QU before I add my regular ending A. If I'm talking about you, though, and I want to say to, then I do not change the C. I leave the C alone. So all of the other forms, the to form, ella, nosotros, ustedes, you leave the C alone before adding the regular ending. And like I said, these really are the regular endings. So you have a, aste, o, amos, aron. If you go back and you look at the last video, you'll see that for all of our AR verbs in the preterite tense, these are the regular endings. We've got a, aste, o, amos, and aron. So, like I said, pirate verbs are first person irregulars because they are only irregular in the yo form, in that yo form. All of the other forms are normal. And the part that's highlighted in red is the only part that's irregular. The C changes to a QU. Next, we'll look at Gar verbs. So all verbs that end in Gar in the preterite tense will change the G to a GU in the yo form. So if we take the verb pagar, which means to pay, we end up changing the G to a GU in the yo form. So we end up with yo pagué. And then in all of the other forms, the to form, the ella, usted form, the nosotros form, and then the ellos, ellas, ustedes form, we just leave that G alone. We don't do anything to it. And then again, if you look at the endings, they're the same. A, aste, o, amos, aron. Because we're still dealing with an AR verb. So all those endings are going to be the regular endings. The only part that's irregular is the GU in the yo form. And the last type of pirate verb that we have, all verbs that end in zar. In the preterite tense, the Z is going to change to a C in the yo form. So like the verb almorzar, which means to eat lunch, is going to get conjugated like this. So we change the Z to a C in the yo form, and then we add our ending, our regular ending A onto the end. So it ends up yo almorcé. So like I ate lunch, maybe yesterday, ayer, or anteayer, the day before yesterday. Tú almorzaste. The Z doesn't change. Ella almorzó. Nosotros almorzamos. And ellos almorzaron. So again, none of them change down here. That's why this is a first person irregular verb, because it only changes in the yo form. And again, like I've been trying to point out to you in each of these on each of these slides, the endings are all the same because again, it is an AR verb in the preterite tense, so we end with a, aste, o, amos, aron. And finally, here is just a list of some common car, gar, zar verbs that you might have already learned or that you might see show up on like your practices and things. So some car verbs, buscar, to look for, sacar, to take. That could be like to take pictures, or even we use it to say to get a good grade. Yo saqué una buena nota. I got a good grade. Practicar, to practice. Tocar, to touch or to play an instrument. Some common gar verbs, pagar, to pay, jugar, to play, llegar, to arrive, and cargar, to charge. Some common zar verbs, almorzar, to eat lunch, empezar, to start, organizar, to organize, and abrazar, to hug. Now, of course, in the past tense, all of these, the meaning would come out just a little bit different. So like the verb sacar, which is to take, in the past, of course, it would be translated as took. Tocar, to touch, that would be touched. Jugar, to play, would be played, or empezar, to start, would be started. So keep in mind that all of these change meaning when they're in the past tense. Also, something that I want to go ahead and point out as well, as you look over this list, you're probably going to notice that there's some verbs on here that used to be stem changers in the present tense. So if you're looking at the verb jugar, almorzar, and empezar, you might think to yourself, wait a minute, shouldn't I be doing a stem changer with these? Shouldn't I be stem changing these verbs? And the answer is actually no. And I will explain more why they are not stem changers in the preterite tense when we actually learn about preterite tense stem changers. Because preterite tense stem changers behave just a little bit differently than present tense stem changers do. So you won't change the U to a UE, or the O to a UE, or the E to an IE on any of these three verbs. I want to practice some conjugating just a few of these verbs with you to show you how easy it is to do in the preterite tense. So tocar, if you want to say touched. So for yo, it would be yo, do. You're going to change this C to a Q, U, and then add the regular ending, so toque. Then you're not going to change the C for any of the rest of them. So tocaste, tocó, tocamos, and tocaron. So you can take a couple of these and practice with them. I'm just conjugating them. For the verb cargar, so like maybe you want to say yesterday I charged my phone, cargué mi celular. The G is going to change to a GU, right? So cargué, in the yo form, yo cargué, but then it won't change. It'll just remain a G in the to form. So cargaste, él, ella, usted, cargó, cargamos, and cargaron. Now let me go ahead and show you one of the stem changers. So we'll do empezar. This is a little bit bigger word, so it'll take a little bit longer to write, but that will give you time to write it in your notes as well. So empezar, for yo, if I want to say I started, I do not change the E to an IE. Oh, and I need to remember that my Z is changing to a C before I add my ending. So empecé. Let me get that out of there. So yo empecé. Now we don't change the Z. So empezaste. Empezó. Empezamos. And empezaron. So you can see on all three of these verbs all the way across, the endings are all the same all the way through, and they're just kind of all similar. They're all irregular in the yo form, and then they're not irregular in the rest of the forms.